Hi there everyone, this is Adrien, the exercise specialist from the Leduc Beaumont Devon Primary Care Network. Hope you all are doing well today. For today's video, I actually wanted to discuss a document known as the 24-hour movement guidelines as created by the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology, also known as CSEP. I am a CSEP clinical exercise physiologist as well as a CSEP high performance specialist. So I am licensed under CSEP. They are one of the governing bodies that I work under. And they have created some awesome reference documents for like general physical activity guidelines and movement guidelines and things like that. And I thought it would be great to quickly discuss this document with everyone today. I discuss it with a lot of my patients because I often say, like, if there's like one overall biggest kind of bang for your buck thing, whether it's general health or weight loss or some chronic disease management stuff, if there's one thing I generally would recommend people get comfortable with, it's the 24-hour movement guidelines, because they are all encompassing. This document can be really easily found if you just Google 24-hour movement guidelines and then the word CSEP, so CSEP. It'll come up under a link that's called CSEP guidelines. It's easy to find. It's a front and back page handout. One page is kind of a bit of a preamble, and then the back page is more like Cole's notes of like the big important factors to take away from it. I get a lot of patients to actually hang it up on their fridge and things like that, just for kind of some basic stuff. So I do want to go over a few things on the document, and then I also want to kind of flesh out a couple of the really important factors that I don't think are spoken about on the document quite enough, and kind of what the goals, at least my interpretation of the goals of it are. So what is great about the document overall is that, and they indicate it on there, is that it is an integration of physical activity, sedentary behavior, and sleep. So three really important cornerstones and pillars to overall health. The document boasts that implementing these kind of guidelines can do things like reducing risk of mortality, cardiovascular disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, cancers, anxieties, depression, dementia, weight gain, and then it can improve things obviously like bone health, mental health, muscularity, functionality, all of those types of things. So when I reviewed the actual CSEP guidelines, obviously, like I said, there's three main components. There's the physical activity component, there's a sleep component, and then there is a sedentary behavior component. So if we start with the physical activity component of it, they follow their regular guidelines, which can be found in the CSEP physical activity guidelines document. So this document agrees with that other document, which I also support, which is they want you to try and aim for 150 minutes a week of moderate to vigorous physical activity. That is aerobic activity at that level, so that's half an hour 5 times a week, as well as roughly 2 or so resistance training or muscular and bone focused exercise per week on top of that. For the 150 minutes of aerobic activity, once again, that's moderate to vigorous intensity. So that's not a casual stroll where you're able to have a conversation like this. That's very low key. No strain. I generally tell people on average, obviously this varies a lot, but on average, you're starting to hit that moderate level when your breathing starts to become intense enough to where it starts to make the ability to have a conversation a little bit more difficult. You should totally still be able to have a conversation, but it should be slightly strained from your breathing. That's when you're starting to hit that moderate range in general for aerobic activity. There's, like I said, there's a lot of nuances in individual examples, but that's a good, safe kind of general guideline. They also talk about several hours of light activity throughout your day, so things like standing, general walking, and things like that. Those aren't considered physical activity, but light activity. We will go more and more into that after. So that's the physical activity component of it. The second part is the sleep component. Obviously, they recommend 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. That's the standard guidelines kind of across the board in most places. We all should know that. Obviously, if you can try and keep similar wake times and sleep times, that is fantastic. The final component is the sedentary behavior component, which I think is very important to go over, and tends to be the bane of a lot of people's existence overall. in general, they want you to limit your overall sedentary time in a full period, like a full 24-hour cycle, not including sleeping time, of course, to 8 hours a day in total. I know for some of us who work, more sedentary jobs, office jobs, so on and so forth, that can be difficult. But then we can just stay. But we put in our strategies like sit to stand, kind of situations for your workstation, spending time working from a standing position, so on and so forth. There's lots of options there. They recommend limiting screen time, which they call recreational screen time. So that's not work screen time, but recreational screen times are things like being on your phone, surfing the internet, things like that, to no more than 3 hours per day, which is a lot of time still if you think about it. So you want to keep that down to at least that, and then obviously break up sitting time as much as possible into shorter and shorter periods of time. So those are the general guidelines provided in the 24-hour movement guidelines. I do want to discuss a couple things in a little more detail that I think are intangible and very important for that. And that is the ideas of making more sedentary time into light activity time and making light activity time into moderate activity time. Examples on how to do that, why it's important, and things like that. So there's a concept and an acronym with exercise physical activity that is called NEAT. It stands for non-exercise activity thermogenesis. What that pretty much boils down to simply is how many calories you are burning overall in a day in time when you are not exercising. So if you think about it, in a 24-hour period, you're let's say you exercise half an hour a day. Fantastic, right? That is great. But that's 4% of a 24-hour cycle, So we have 23 and a half other hours of potentially caloric burning time in a day that can be far more impactful overall than half an hour of exercise and calorie burning. Obviously, that half an hour of exercise is incredibly important. We need that there for bone health, muscle, cardiovascular, all those kind of things. It's incredibly important. We don't want to forget that. But we do have this other 23 and a half hour window per day. So what's pretty incredible about the body is the body is incredibly good at keeping homeostasis, like keeping a balance. So what I mean by that is if you happened, we have what's called our basal metabolic rate, which is kind of the baseline of calories we burn in a day just to be alive. So if you were to lay in bed all day and not move, there's still a certain amount of calories that you use and burn throughout the day just to keep your body functioning and things like that. And then when we take that number with the amount of calories that you burn throughout your day doing your regular activity, that's kind of your net kind of energy kind of and equilibrium, and that's kind of what you need per day to maintain your current level of function and physiology and things like that. And what we tend to notice is as people increase their exercise per day, so let's say they increase their physical, like they burn an extra 300 calories a day exercising, they've just started adding that in. People will naturally save about 300 extra calories throughout the rest of your day without even realizing it, through either being more sedentary, eating a little more because you're hungrier, doing less activity later, so on and so forth. And oftentimes we don't even realize it, but our body wants to keep that net neutral, not that net kind of a balance. It's one reason why sustained weight loss can be difficult. Because if we burn more, our body's going to try and save more somewhere else, and that's where the idea of NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, comes in, where we want to find time throughout your day where we can increase how many calories you are burning without it feeling like formal exercise. Okay, and that's where the real kind of sweet spot is for a lot of health markers, like appropriate weight management, all the physiology stuff, weight loss, hormones, blood sugar control, muscularity, functionality, all of that stuff. So how do we look at doing that? Because obviously we can't expect anyone to work out 24/7. That's not going to happen, and expecting most people to work out more than about half an hour per day is asking a lot. And even for a lot of people, that half an hour a day is a lot. A lot of people, I get them only exercising a couple times a week for half an hour, if that. Sometimes it's 10-15 minutes if they're not used to doing something physically active, right? But on the whole, getting anyone to do more than half an hour a day, though possible, and there are some of us that are in that camp, that tends to be difficult for the vast majority of people. So to keep your burning of calories as high as possible throughout the day, and you're doing as much physical activity as possible, we want to find times where we can increase the NEAT, like I was saying, the non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So we got to do that by finding times throughout your day to make you more physically active, doing things where it doesn't feel like physical activity. So you don't allow yourself to kind of come back down and save calories here and there because you're being more active overall. So you get that half an hour of exercise in a day, and then you're a little more active throughout the day. So you don't allow your body to kind of to balance it out, to kind of maintain. So a couple examples of that, and I think that concept is a big thing with the 24-hour movement guidelines that I don't think it quite flushes out enough. I think it's the most impactful thing for people. So how do we do that? Obviously, I want to discuss the sedentary behavior. I want to discuss the light activity, and I want to discuss the moderate activity. So first with the sedentary, and trying to limit sedentary to 8 hours per day and breaking it up. My general rule of thumb is trying to sit for more than 1 hour at a time. Research shows that if you're sitting for more than an hour at a time, our nervous system goes into a far more rest and a digest state. So fat storage goes up, things like that. And we become more lackadaisical, so on and so forth, lazy, we don't want to move, all of that. So I generally recommend people, if you know you're going to be sedentary, whether it's for work or you're binging a show on Netflix or whatever it is, to try and set a timer to get up every hour or after every episode of a show. You don't even have to be up for a super long time, but getting up, walking around your house or your kitchen or your living room for a minute, 2 minutes, maybe do a couple of stretches or go to the bathroom, whatever, come back. It's that short, and then you can sit back down. So it's not super long. Couple minutes and you can sit back down. It doesn't quite put you back in like a fight or flight state. Probably we don't need you in that constant state of fight or flight, but it does put you into more kind of active, more fat burning, more metabolically active kind of a situation. And that's every hour. That's just a couple minutes. So that's the sedentary behavior component of it. Try not to be seated for any more than an hour at a time. And if you do have to be up for a super long, if you do have to sit for a super long period of time, just trying to break it up like that, just a couple minutes and you're fine. Next is to try and make sedentary time into more light activity time. So how do we do that? Going back to our sitting watching a Netflix show example, this covers that component as well as our last component, but what I'll often recommend is if you're going to be watching a show for a long period of time, or you have to do see to work, if you can do things like try to stand for the last 5 to 10 minutes of every hour of an episode of a show. So if you're watching a show that is an hour long, you set a timer that at the 50-minute mark, I'm gonna stand, and I'm gonna stand to watch the last 10 minutes of this show. Or I'm gonna walk back and forth in my living room while I watch it, or I'm gonna stand there and I'm gonna march, or even I'm gonna sit there and I'm gonna do some stretches or some jumping jacks or some leg flutters, something kind of like that for the last 10 minutes of every hour of a show. So if you think about that, if let's use the work example. Let's say you do a sedentary job for 8 hours a day, right? If you do 10 minutes of that per every hour, where you're just moving around a little bit, that's an extra 80 minutes of physical activity that you are getting per day, right there, per day, that you were not expecting. That is incredibly beneficial for you overall as compared to if you just stayed sedentary. So 10 minutes and an hour, that equals an extra 80 minutes per day of physical activity stuff overall. That can be incredibly beneficial for you. So something to keep in mind, because these little things throughout your day that these movement guidelines help with can be, what's great about them is they're small, so they're easy to accomplish, but they exponentially grow over time throughout your day to be incredibly impactful. So they're very important in that respect. An extra 120 minutes of just moving a day when you're a very sedentary person, that's an incredibly impactful amount of extra calories burned, more physical activity in terms of movement, muscles working, hormonal changes. That's 120 less minutes you are potentially spending in a rest and a digest state, so on and so forth. So that's the sedentary side of it. If you're doing something that is light activity and we want to make it more moderate activity, that's where it kind of gets a little tough to come up with specific examples. I find for people, a couple of easy ones that I often use is I've had people where they have to sweep their floors, for example. Which I would consider a light activity. That's great. That's fantastic. How can we make that into more moderate activity without it feeling like formal exercise? Well, a great way to do that that I've had some people do is when they're cleaning their floors, they turn on some music that they enjoy and they dance while they're sweeping their floors. That's why that way sweeping becomes a little more dynamic, a little more calorically intensive, so on and so forth, right? So that's a super easy way to make light activity into moderate activity without it seeming too intensive, and hopefully something that you enjoy. But you do that a couple times a week, that's adding to your physical activity exponentially in such a huge extent overall. Another easy kind of regular daily example is I've had people, for example, that work in apartment buildings or manage apartment buildings, and they always take the elevator up and down, right? And so I've made plans with people to be like, okay, throughout this week you got to do a total of 15 sets of stairs throughout the week. So that first week that might be 3 sets per day, Monday through Friday. If you're working 8 hours in a day, doing 3 total sets isn't that big of a deal. You can do 1 in the morning, 1 just after lunch, 1 at the end of the day, just to go to different apartments to do your property management job or whatever it may be, right? And then 15 total sets per week broken down into systems like that can be very helpful, right? And then then I would add a couple sets a week per se. So next week it may be 17 or 19, something like that, and then so on and so forth, right? And then so then eventually you're going from doing 0 sets of stairs per week to doing 30, 40, 50 sets of stairs per week of additional exercise and caloric burning that you have to do based on your job, and it's keeping you way more active, burning way more calories, so on and so forth. And it's really no more time consuming, right? And then as long as you do it slowly and progressively, it won't get too much more difficult over time. It'll get a little more difficult, obviously, but you build on it, right? It gets progressive like that. So you adapt to the increasing resistance of the increased volume of the sets of stairs. You adapt to it as it continues to progress, because that's the thing with physical activity. It must continue to progress. It must be progressive in nature, or your body will always regress to the absolute minimum that your body needs to maintain that level of functionality. Now, I'll say that again. Exercise must always be progressive if you want to be able to make progress yourself. A lot of people, they do the same workout every day or whatever, and what you'll notice over time is your body will maintain a certain level of functionality to do that workout exactly, if that's what you always do. If you do 15 minutes on the treadmill and a couple sets of crunches and push-ups, and that's your thing, your body will be as functional as it needs to be to do that, but no more. And your body will always regress to the absolute minimum that it needs to in order to maintain that level of fitness to do that goal. It really our body is still very our physiology is still very rudimentary and still rooted a lot in the caveman times, for lack of an example, right? We're still very much a saving and a storing physiological creature at present, right? So our body doesn't want to have to waste anything, any calories, any resources that it doesn't need to, absolutely need to. That's how we build and grow through resistance training and cardiovascular training, is we are stressing our physiology to the point where our body pretty much says we have to adapt to this, or else we could be at risk for being eaten by a tiger or something like that, right? To kind of put it simply, right? So but we will only adapt to absolute minimum that's absolutely needed to hit that. So that's something. So that's why exercise should be progressive in nature. That's something I'll have to go into in a separate video. I could talk about it all day. So this has already been a far longer video than I was expecting, so sorry about that, everyone. But just to kind of round out in general with the 24-hour movement guidelines, it's a fantastic document. I highly recommend checking it out on the CSEP guidelines websites. Once again, that's csepguidelines.com. It's an awesome document. They have that there. They also have movement guidelines for other age groups. I just took like the actual standard guidelines for someone that's 18 to 64 years of age, because that's the most common demographic. But they have ones for younger and older and everything. So please check them out. But to break it down simply, 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous cardiovascular exercise. If you can do that per week, fantastic. Couple resistance training sessions per week, whether with your body weight or with external weight, whatever you can manage. Trying to sleep 7 to 9 hours a night. Limiting, recreational screen time to 3 hours per day. Limiting total sedentary time to 8 hours per day, and then trying to find sedentary time to make it into light activity time into moderate activity time. You combine all of that with your daily half an hour of exercise. That sounds like a lot. It really isn't when you get into it. It just becomes part of your regular day. It's an incredibly impactful tool, an incredibly impactful system to help people maintain kind of happier, healthier lives overall. So I hope you all found that helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to post them down below. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. My name is Adrien. I'm the exercise specialist at the Leduc Beaumont Devon Primary Care Network. Thank you so much, and have a great day.